People did not invent monsters because of movies. They invented them long before Hollywood, long before novels, long before cities, writing, and suspicious movie posters claiming to be based on a true story. Tens of thousands of years ago, while humans were still struggling to survive in a world of ice, hunger, darkness, and dangerous animals, someone carved a small figure out of mammoth ivory. It had the body of a human and the head of an animal. Today, it is often called the Lion Man. That object matters because it shows something remarkable. Very early in human history, people were already imagining beings that did not exist in nature. The Lion Man was not simply a lion, and it was not simply a person. It belonged somewhere between the human world and the animal world. We cannot say with certainty what it meant to the people who made it. It may have been connected to ritual, storytelling, spiritual belief, social identity, or something we no longer have the right words to describe. What we can say is that humans were already creating hybrid beings long before recorded mythology. That raises a strange question. Why would a species fighting to stay alive spend precious time and effort inventing creatures that were not real? Monsters appear almost everywhere in human culture. There are dragons, vampires, werewolves, zombies, sea monsters, demons, giants, ghosts, and countless local spirits and strange beings. Some live in forests, some in deserts, some in mountains, some under the sea, and some in the corner of a dark room when a coat on a chair suddenly looks a little too human at 2 in the morning. At first, monsters seem like simple products of fear. But when we look more carefully, they become much more interesting. They appear in archaeology, religion, palace architecture, medieval manuscripts, psychology, and modern cultural studies. One of the first surprises is that monsters were not always invented to be evil. In ancient Assyria, for example, huge hybrid figures called Lamassu stood at important palace entrances. They had the body of a bull or lion, wings, and a human head. To a modern viewer, they look like magnificent monsters. But their purpose was not simply to frighten people, they were protective figures. They guarded entrances and projected divine authority. They were not just creatures of fear, they were symbols of power, order, and protection. The same complexity appears in the figure of Pazuzu from ancient Mesopotamia. Today, many people associate Pazuzu with horror, but in ancient contexts, images of Pazuzu could be used as protective objects. A frightening being could be called upon to defend people from something even more frightening. That may sound strange, but the logic is deeply human. When life feels dangerous and uncontrollable, especially in moments like childbirth, people may want a powerful force on their side. If you cannot eliminate fear, you may try to give fear a face and then ask a stronger face to protect you from it. This means monsters are not only enemies. Sometimes they are symbolic weapons. They stand at the edge of danger and say, "Do not come closer." Monsters also help people explain and remember the world. In medieval Europe, strange creatures filled bestiaries, books that described animals and imaginary beings along with moral or religious meanings. Some of these creatures seem biologically impossible to us today, but that was not always the point. A two-headed serpent, for example, was not just a bad science lesson. It could become a symbol of danger, contradiction, confusion, or a world that did not behave according to ordinary rules. In that sense, monsters worked almost like ancient memes. They turned complicated ideas into images that people could remember. Instead of an abstract lecture about temptation, disorder, fear, or moral danger, a culture could tell a story about a creature. The creature made the lesson vivid. Psychology offers another possible explanation. One influential idea in cognitive science is that supernatural beings are memorable because they are both familiar and wrong in just the right way. A person is familiar. A lion is familiar. But a person with a lion's head is strange. A corpse is familiar. Movement is familiar. But a corpse that gets up and walks is deeply unsettling. A wolf is familiar. A human is familiar. A human who becomes a wolf is hard to forget. Researchers such as Pascal Boyer and Charles Ramble have studied how people remember concepts that violate ordinary expectations. Their work supports the idea that beings with slightly counterintuitive features can be especially memorable across different cultural settings. But this should be treated carefully. It is a supported theory, not a complete explanation for every monster humans have ever imagined. A strange idea may be easy to remember, but memory alone does not make it culturally powerful. For a monster to last, it usually needs emotion, and the strongest emotion of all is fear. Imagine being an early human at night. There is no electric light, no hospital nearby, no weather report, no search engine, no comfortable explanation for every sound outside the cave. Something moves in the dark. Is it wind? An animal? A stranger? Something else entirely? In a dangerous environment, assuming that something is out there could be safer than assuming everything is fine. Human beings are very good at detecting agents at sensing that someone or something may be acting in the world around us. From that tendency, it is reasonable to infer that monsters helped people turn vague danger into a recognizable figure. Disease could become a demon. The sea could hold a monster. The forest could be full of spirits. Death could take the form of ghosts, walking corpses, or beings from another world. This does not mean every monster came from fear, but fear is one of the strongest ingredients in monster making. A monster gives fear a face. Once fear has a face, people can tell stories about it. They can warn children, they can perform rituals. They can carve it, paint it, name it, fight it, worship it, or place it at the gate of a palace. Monsters also help societies draw boundaries. In cultural studies, monster theory often treats monsters as expressions of cultural anxiety. A monster is rarely random. It often appears at the border between categories, human and animal, living and dead, civilized and wild, pure and impure, inside the group and outside the group. A werewolf is both human and beast. A vampire is both alive and dead. A zombie has a human body but lacks human will. A dragon may be an animal, a natural disaster, a treasure guardian, and a symbol of power all at once. Because monsters live at boundaries, they allow societies to talk about things that are difficult to discuss directly: violence, desire, illness, death, outsiders, moral failure, chaos, and loss of control. They dramatize the fear that the world may not stay in its proper place. But this idea also carries a warning. Throughout history, people have sometimes monstered real human beings. They have turned outsiders, enemies, or marginalized groups into symbols of danger. That kind of monster making can become a tool of dehumanization. So the study of monsters is not only about imaginary creatures, it is also about asking who gets called monstrous and why. There is another tempting explanation people often like. Maybe ancient monsters came from fossils. It is an attractive idea. Someone finds the bones of a strange extinct animal and imagines a dragon or a griffin. In some cases, fossils may have influenced stories. But we have to be careful. One famous suggestion is that fossils of Protoceratops inspired the myth of the griffin. Recent research has strongly challenged that connection, arguing that the evidence is thin and that griffins may simply have been imaginative combinations of familiar animals such as birds of prey and big cats. That is a useful reminder. A theory can sound good and still not be proven. Responsible storytelling requires a simple question: where is the evidence? If the evidence is weak, the honest answer is not definitely. It is maybe, but we do not know. So why did humans invent monsters? The most careful answer is that there was probably no single reason. Monsters served several purposes at once. They helped with survival. They warned people about danger, the dark forest, the deep sea, the unknown stranger, the forbidden place, the rule you should not break. They helped memory. A creature that is partly familiar and partly impossible is easier to remember than an ordinary animal. They helped society. They marked the boundary between order and chaos, human and non-human, acceptable and forbidden, and they helped create meaning. When people faced things too large to control, death, illness, childbirth, disaster, violence, nature, the unknown, they gave those forces a shape. That may be why monsters have never disappeared. They have only changed form. Once they lived in caves, forests, deserts, oceans, temples, and palace gates. Now they live in movies, novels, games, internet memes, nightmares, and sometimes in the way we talk about people or forces we do not understand. In the end, monsters do not only show us what humans fear, they show us how humans think. We imagine. We organize chaos into stories. We turn invisible dangers into visible forms. We teach each other through fear, wonder, humor, and warning. We look into the dark and ask what might be there. And perhaps the deepest answer is not that monsters reveal something outside of us, perhaps they reveal something inside us. They are not real as biological creatures, but they are very real as traces of the human mind. Every monster is a mirror. It reflects our fears, our hopes, our boundaries, our curiosity, and our need to make sense of a world that has never been completely safe. So the next time we see a monster on screen, in a myth, or in a story, the best question may not be, is it real? A better question is, why did we need to imagine it?